Okay, students, let's look at validation, the idea of data validation. And we'll need to check usually a string's length, the presence, for example, it should not be empty. The range, maybe data should be within a range, certain range. And also pattern checks. So, for example, if you've got date of birth, they need to be in a certain pattern. So just as an example here, let's create a function which checks a username. So we'll call our function check username. We'll pass through username as our parameter. And then what can we do? If the username, if username does equal an empty string, we can say username cannot be empty, something to that effect. And usually with a function we return maybe true or false here, so we'll do that. Makes it easiest for us to check multiple things, you see. What else can we have? Let's say we are going to check if the username, let's say username needs to be 3 to 15 characters. So let's create an if statement for that. If the length of our username that we're passing through is less than 3 or less length of username is greater than 15, then we can put a little print statement in here saying username must be between 3 and 15 characters long. So after we've printed that out to the console, we can return false. Else, if everything else is okay, we can return true. Let's just say those are the only two parameters for our username. So we could pass through a username. We could ask the user, we can call it something slightly different. It doesn't really matter. Input, enter a username. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll add to our program first before we do any of that. So let's just keep on going. Let's check for passwords. Let's have another one that checks for passwords. And we're going to pass through one parameter here, a string, password. And similar thing, we're going to copy that. I'm going to take all of these because we're going to use the same thing for our password. So just change that to password cannot be empty. Password. And let's just change this up. So password, let's say it needs to be at least 8 characters. Right? So if password, just change that to password. If password is less than 8, must be more than 8 characters long. So a little bit of a difference from the username. Okay. And what we'll be doing is have some grand sort of statement at the end where we would expect both of these things to be true for a valid username and password. So that's why we're returning true and false from these. So let's get a bit more complicated. Let's have has an uppercase character. And we'll start off with false. Does it have a lowercase character? Because most passwords need an uppercase, lowercase, a special number, a number and a special character, and a certain length. So we're going to check for all of these things. And we'll assume that they're all false to begin with until we check. So because we haven't checked through them yet, they're all going to be false until otherwise. So what we'll do is also say what a special character is. And we'll make a string. And this could be things like exclamation mark, @ symbol, hash, dollar, percentage, all of these things, all the things that you normally find, like plus, minus, equals, square brackets, curly braces, colon, semicolons, apostrophes, forward slashes, this kind of thing. So that'll do. I think there are some more we can put in, but that will do for now, I'd say. So the next part of this is we want a little bit of a for loop to go over. So for each character in our password that we're passing through this function, we want to check to see if it's any of those things. So if character and using the string method is upper, okay, so if we put the string method is upper in, it's going to check if a character is upper. And if it has seen an uppercase character, we can change our has upper equals true now. So as long as that method is upper, has seen at least one uppercase character, we're going to change our Boolean value to true. And we want to do that for all of these things. So else if character is lower, so we want to check, are there lowercase characters? Has lower equals true. Else if character is digit, to make sure that there's a number in there. Has digit will then equal true. We want them all to be true. And then we want this one final thing, which is a little bit trickier to figure out. Else if character in special characters. So this is going to check if whatever characters on there they're looking at that particular point in the password is one of these, if it's in there. And if it is, we can say has special equals true as well. So we can do that. We can actually check if that single character is somewhere in that string of special characters, which is quite neat. So then we want to check a little for loop. So we'd go through all of these. You know, if it doesn't have any of those, if not has upper, we would say password must have uppercase, must include an uppercase character, and we would do that for all of them, and then return false if that was the case. So we're actually returning the false value then. So we would do that for all of them. I'm not sure. I think I'm going to go for each one of those. It's going to take a little while. But you sort of get the idea of how we can check for validation here. And then finally, if we ask the user, right, so this is way out of the functions here. So there'll be lots of other ones here, and at the end it will be else return true. And then username, enter a username, password, input, enter a password. And those two can be passed through these functions. And then we'll want some sort of conditional statement. If, and this is where we call the functions. If check username, I'm passing through username, and check password, passing through the password. And that's the same as saying, if we call this function and it returns true, then it would be the same as saying, if true and true. So that's why, if we do all our checks, we want to return true. So over here, check username. As long as it's not empty and it's between 3 and 15 characters long, it will return true. So when we call that function, it will return a value, true or false. And we need, for an AND operator, Boolean operator for AND, we need both sides to be true in order for for the whole statement to be classed as true. And then we could say print both username and password are valid. Else invalid username and or password. Okay, we could also check which one of them was wrong by putting a little bit more logic in there. Let's run the console and just put a username in. What could our username be? I'm going to put something empty in there. I'm going to put nothing in there. So username cannot be empty, invalid username or password. So we know that the first bit works. So let's run it again. Enter a username. I'll just put my name. Enter a password. So I'm going to put just the same thing, which I know is not going to be enough. So password must be 8 characters long. So not only was the username not long enough, but the password wouldn't have checked out either. So let's run it again. So let's try again. James Tobin. That's at least 8 characters long. So we know we've got true for the check username. And let's try a password with an uppercase. So I've got James Tobin. And then I'm going to have 2025 exclamation mark. So it's saying both username and password are valid, because so far I'm only checking here for the uppercase ones. But if I'm going to add more to this, what I would do is have else if not has lower, I'd print password must include lower case characters. So let's do that. And remember, not is a negator, so it's if it wasn't true, then it's false. So a not false is true, not true is false. And I also want to return false here. So I'm just going to print these two just to make it a bit quicker. Digits. As special. Okay, I think that's everything we need. So let's just clear the console, run it again. So I'm going to put 8-digit username in, so that should be okay. And then I'm going to put a password in, but I'm not going to include a special character. So I've put everything else in, and it says it's caught it. So passwords must include special characters, invalid username or password. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing again, but this time I'm going to add a special character. So username is 8 characters long. Password, I'm going to make it the same as the username, but 2025 and then an exclamation mark. And it says both username and password are valid. So let's just look through the code again. So we've got a function here which has a parameter, and we're looking to see if it's not an empty string and it's not less than 3 or greater than 15. If any of those things happen to be the case, then we return false. And that makes it much easier for this statement to be either true or false at the end. And we could expand this to say, check the username and check the password and then check both of them if we wanted to. And you could tell the user that it was their password that was incorrect. And then we've got another function here, which is the parameter password. We're also going to check if it's not empty. And in this case, if it's greater than 8 characters. If it's less than 8, then we've got a problem. Less than or equal to, well, we can say must be 8 characters or more. That would be better here. And then we've got all of these variables here with Boolean values. And we start off with false. And we've also got a whole bank of special characters that we're allowing. And then we've got a for loop to check over each character in the password that the user types in later. And we will check each of those. If it is an uppercase, then we say true. To has upper, that will change from false to true. Again, we will do that for the check of the lowercase, if there's a digit, and if there's one that's in the special characters string. So we want all of them to be true. And if they're not true, then these conditional statements here will tell the user what the problem is. So if not has upper, then we didn't find an uppercase character. So password must include an uppercase character, and it returns false. And then as soon as you return a value in a function, the function stops. It doesn't carry on. Once you've returned either true or false, you're done. So if we label this better, we'll say the main program is here. The main program is underneath all of these. And we'll say that we've got our subprograms, or sometimes known as subroutines, here. We've got no global variables, so our main program is down here, and the main program is actually quite short. We're just asking the user for a username, a password, and we're passing those as arguments through to the functions, and we're simply looking for a true or a false. And of course, if that function returns true, then all the checks were made and it's okay. And if that one returns true, then all the checks were made. And you have to have 1 and 1, or true and true, for this statement to be true. And if they are, then we can confidently say that the username and password are valid. Else, if there's any other permutation of that, it's invalid.